I'd like to welcome you to Babson College. A lot of people outside the community today, welcome. I'd like to welcome you to today's Arts and Humanities Foundation speaker, Temple Grandin. We're very fortunate to have her speak to us today, and I'm really glad to see so many of you showed up. Before I continue my introduction, I'd like to ask you to not take pictures during Dr. Grandin's speech. She's happy to take pictures with you after the event, during the question and answer, and during the book signing, which will be happening over there after the event. But during the event, no pictures and no videos, please. So thank you for that. Every year, the Arts and Humanities Division invites a speaker to campus. This year, we're generously sponsored by the Dean's Office, Disability Services, and the John D. White lecture series. I just had a few questions from people in the audience who got a free book. The lecture series is responsible for that, and yes, it's free. You do not have to return it. Also, a big thanks to the people at the events office and the marketing people of the college, without whom this would not have been possible. And then a few words about our speaker. Most of you are intimately familiar with Dr. Grandin's work, but for those of you who are not, Dr. Grandin is known around the world for her very innovative cattle handling research. She is also known around the world for her autism advocacy. She, today in her talk, will address both topics, and I believe even tie in some references to entrepreneurship, of which we're all very fond here at Babson College. She's a professor of animal science at Colorado State University, and you also may know her from a wonderful HBO film called Temple Grandin, starring Claire Danes. Check it out if you haven't seen that yet. Yes, exactly. Books for sale after the event are Animals in Translation, Animals Make Us Human, and Thinking in Pictures. Grab a book, get it signed if you haven't already. Now, I want to end this introduction with a brief quote from Temple Grandin from an interview she gave with MSNBC. So let me read to you her words. I believe there's a point where mild autistic traits are just normal human variation. Mild autism can give you a genius like Einstein. If you have severe autism, you could remain nonverbal. You don't want people to be on the severe end of the spectrum. But if you got rid of all the autism genetics, you wouldn't have science or art. All you would have is a bunch of social yak-yaks. I think it's fair to say... I think it's fair to say that here at Babson College we have our share of social yak-yaks. In fact, it might be a new major that I heard is proposed. So we will greatly benefiting from your insights tonight. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Grandin.
Great to be here. I hope this mic's working okay. If it's not, I'll use this one. Otherwise, I'm going to turn that one aside. And I want to talk about a lot of different things tonight. And, you know, Einstein had no language until age 3. You know, what would happen to little Albert in today's school system? Steve Jobs was a weird loner who brought snakes to his elementary school. And he was bullied and bullied and bullied and teased and had to leave one high school and go to another high school, guess where, in Cupertino, California. And he got involved with the neighborhood computer club. And that's what saved him. Tesla, who invented the power plant, would definitely be labeled autistic today. Mozart was pretty weird. In fact, half of Silicon Valley is probably on the spectrum. And I'm not gonna give you the names of the live ones, but you just look them up on the internet and look at some of the interviews. You'll see it. See, one of the problems with autism is the very big spectrum. And at one end, you've got just where it's a normal variation. At the other end, you've got people that are very severe. And one of the problems I'm finding is I'm seeing people that the teachers know how to work with the more severe kids, but they don't know what to do with this smart kind of Asperger kid. In fact, they're going to take that out of the diagnosis and call that social communication disorder. Well, that's just mild autism. So you got a bunch of doctors sitting around fighting over what these labels should be. First of all, diagnosis is not precise. The other thing I'm finding, and I'm seeing with too many young people today, is is they are, and I have attention shifting problems. It's a problem I still have. The reason why I asked for no pictures is I'm very slow on attention shifting. So when there's a distraction, I have a problem with that. And it totally breaks my train of thought. During the book signing, take all the pictures you want. And now I just forgot what I was talking about. It's a problem. And as I'm getting older, I think it's getting worse too. And it's a very, very big spectrum. And I'm seeing too many young people today that are on the mild end of the spectrum that ought to be doing really great jobs, like, starting entrepreneurial kind of businesses, like Apple, doing these kinds of things. And they're getting so hung up on autism, that becomes their whole world. When I was a young person in my 20s, my whole world was cattle chutes. Yes, and I drove people crazy talking about cattle chutes all the time. But I designed a system called the center tract restrainer system that half of all this cattle in the US and Canada go in. All the big meatpacking plants have it. In fact, if you get the Temple Grandin movie, that drawing that is in the titles, those are actual construction drawings for the piece of equipment. Boy, the geek side of me really, really, really likes that. I just love that. And, I'm a college professor first. I was just up in the hotel this afternoon and spent half an hour on the phone talking with my graduate student about a project that we're doing. And I'm not going to let autism totally take over. I'm still a PACO instructor for animal welfare auditing at the plants. I've got a new book coming out called The Autistic Brain, and my publicist tried to book a book tour on top of PACO training. No way. No way. Because I think it's really important that I still have a real job. I'm seeing too many kids today getting all hung up on autism. That's all they can think about. Because where are all the older people with mild Asperger's and mild autism? They're employed. Oh, they design plants. They're the weird guys that run the maintenance shop. The world would fall down without these people. They absolutely fall down. And this is, I'm getting concerned where juniors not going where he ought to be going. You see, you got to stretch these kids. Mother had a really good sense of just how hard to push me. She couldn't push me too hard, no surprises. And when I was 15, I was afraid to go to my aunt's ranch. And she wasn't going to let me not go. It was going to be go for 2 weeks or maybe a week, or go all summer, but not going. And once I got out there, I just absolutely loved it. And I'm seeing kids that aren't learning basic skills, like shaking hands, saying please and thank you, how to shop, how to go in a restaurant and order food, just basic things like that. I'm seeing kids not being taught these things. It's sort of becoming their label. And the problem is, it's such a big spectrum. When I was 3 years old, I had no language. When I was the kind of kid they just put in institutions. In fact, I gave a talk down at the Tufts Veterinary College in Grafton. That's on the grounds of the old Massachusetts State Hospital. And if you walk down this dirt road, there's these crumbling, creepy old buildings. And I think that's where, I could have gone. Mother wasn't going to let that happen, because I'm from Dedham, Massachusetts. I grew up around here. Now I want to get you thinking about different ways of thinking, because I'm a visual thinker. I don't think in words. And there's a lot of different ways that different people think. And the thing is, people that don't have labels just have milder versions of this. I'm seeing a lot of dyslexic people are great in business. There's an article in Fortune on dyslexic CEOs. Oh, the head of JetBlue had ADHD. So he was really great on selling the concept, not so great on ops. They had that total mess down there at the Kennedy Airport. Absolute total mess. That's where you got to get a different kind of person for ops. Because you got to, well, maybe if the staff can't get to work in the snow, you're going to have a real mess out there trying to unload the planes. That's the sort of stuff that, as a visual thinker, I can see. But different kinds of minds are good at doing different things. If you want to understand animals, and I have my book, Animals in Translation there, autism, art, and mathematics, you got to get away from verbal language. There's a whole way of thinking that has nothing to do with words. And we need to be making a lot of value on this kind of thinking. See, Steve Jobs was an artist. He wasn't an engineer. He was an artist. That's what he was. Look up his patents. You can look at them on Google Patents. An animal's world is sensory-based. They don't think in words. They're going to think in pictures, smells, touch sensations. Just imagine what the dog smellalizes on the local tree. He knows who's been there, their friend or foe, what their rank is, how long ago they were there, anybody around to breed with. There's all kinds of information on the local tree. But that's sort of hard for us to imagine. Now, in normal human beings, language covers up visual thinking and other kinds of thinking. There's a type of Alzheimer's that as the language part of the brain gets wrecked, pictures come out. People sometimes become artists for 4 or 5 years. And then eventually the whole brain is trashed. And when Van Gogh painted Starry Night, and I think he had a lot of autistic traits, he didn't realize he was making mathematical patterns in Starry Nights. I don't think Van Gogh knows anything about mathematics, but he was putting mathematical patterns in there. Now the thing is, the normal brain tends to overgeneralize and leave out the details. The autistic brain is all about the details. That's what's called bottom-up thinking. Bottom-up thinking really, really works well for certain kinds of thinking. You know, you take the details, lots of little details, lots of different specific examples, and you put them together to form a whole. That's one of the reasons why you got to get these kids out doing a lot of stuff to fill up their database. Because for me to understand something in the future, I have to compare it back to something I've read or something I've experienced. But the normal mind tends to overgeneralize. And I find this all the time when people ask me about behavior problems in pets or horses and behavior problems in kids. And they'll say stuff like, my kid has behavior issues in a classroom. I can't even begin to answer that. I don't know what the kid's age is. Is this a 3-year-old having a tantrum? Is it an 8th grader that, hit the teacher on the head? I got to know more about this. Or they'll say, my dog is crazy. People do this all the time. I don't know what that means. Is he all happy and jumping on you when you come home? Or did he bite somebody? I've got to know a lot more about it. And this is overgeneralization. Happens all the time. Now, the very earliest work I ever did with livestock was to look at visual detail that scares cattle that most people tended to not notice. Now, this just shows the entrance going into a veterinary facility at a feed yard, and the cattle didn't want to go in there. Well, they didn't notice that the problem here is the cattle were afraid of the flag. You've got rapid movement, high contrast, and a real scary noise that kind of sounds like fire if you kind of think about it. That's why the cattle didn't want to go in there. No, they wanted to rip up the whole facility. It's sort of like the most obvious is often the least obvious. Look at how that animal's looking at that streak of light. He's locked right onto it. Most people don't notice that. Or there might be a little chain hanging down in the chute, and the cattle see that. And why after 40 years do I still have to talk about a chain hanging in a chute? I got to talk about a chain because people don't take it out. They don't take them out. I guess it gives me job security. It gives me job security, and then I go out and do my real job. So I got down in the chutes to see what cattle were seeing. And when I started doing this in the early 70s, I was looked at like I was a total nutcase doing this. Why is it important to see what cattle are seeing? And you can see on a sunny day, I got shadows. Cloudy day, I won't have the shadows. They can see people. Maybe somebody hung a coat on the fence. The movie did a great job of showing this. They did an absolutely great job. Now this seems so obvious when I tell it, but it wasn't obvious at the time. Look at how the horse and the zebra have an ear on each other, and then the other ear is on me taking the picture. Look at the posture of your animal. Horses and cattle, you see the whites of their eyes, they're starting to get upset. Horses and cattle are flashing tails, not happy, not in that species. There are species differences. Look at what your animal's telling you. Now, I always get asked, do they know they're going to get slaughtered? And don't worry, I'm not going to show any gross slaughter pictures. I do have a video, a beef plant video tour with Temple Grandin, and it will show some of my systems. You can look that up on YouTube if you want. But one of the things I had to answer very early on in my career was, do cattle know they're going to get slaughtered? So I'd go over to this Swift plant. And in the movie, they had to make it Abbott because Swift's still a real brand name. And then I'd go over to the feed yards and watch them go on the veterinary chute. They behave the same way in both places. Now you'll notice there that fence isn't that high. That's a 5'6" fence. These animals are absolutely capable of jumping that. They can just go hop and they can come right out. And they don't. I think at this particular place, I think maybe 1 out of, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of them ever thought about jumping it. But the distractions, see how you got a little piece of chain hanging down there? Now they don't like the dark. And one thing good they did here is put in some white translucent plastic so they're not going into the dark. I'm amazed at how I can make a slaughterhouse work. Just give me some cardboard, some zip ties, a portable light, maybe something to duct tape to fasten the light with. You control what they see. They don't like the dark. They don't like reflections. Now one thing we've got here that's bad is we got people standing right where they shouldn't be standing. When I show this slide to my students, half my students don't see the people standing right there. Now that is the remains of the Fukushima nuclear power plant. And as a visual thinker, when I found out why these burned up, 4 reactors melted down, breach of containment, like super bad here, a visual thinker would never make this mistake. It's not real smart when you live next to the sea to put some really important emergency generators that run this super important emergency cooling pump in a non-waterproof basement. Because they put the backup and the backup, yes, they're the size of diesel trucks, but they still don't work when they drown under the water. Could have had some submarine doors, could have had some sump pumps, and you wouldn't have had this accident. This is stuff I understand, because you probably saw the dip vat in the movie, and we had to use those pumps for the dip vats. Yeah, I understand that kind of stuff. Oh boy, I'd have waterproof doors, and I'd have 3 sump pumps. I want to make sure I got plenty of backup, so if it leaks, I can keep it dry. I'm going, how could they do this? And when I was younger, I used to think these kind of mistakes were stupidity. Well, you know what? The mathematicians didn't see it. They think differently. Yeah, you need a visual thinker on the team. Well, what I've noticed in working with the major meat companies is that every single major meat company, the guy that designs the whole entire plant layout, is the draftsman. The degreed engineer can't visualize it. But you need the degreed engineer to figure out all the roof trusses and figure out all the boilers and electrical systems. There's stuff that us visual thinkers can't do because we're terrible at math. Now, this is a picture a young man sent to me to show how he actually has movies in his head. Everything I think about, there is a picture. And if I don't have a picture, I don't have a thought. It's just that simple. No picture, no thought. Now, I realized my thinking was different when I asked people about church steeples. Think about a church steeple. How does it come into your mind? And I was really shocked to find out that most people get this vague, generalized image. I only see specific ones. I go, you mean to get a vague, generalized thing? That's really kind of crazy. I thought everybody thought in specific pictures like me. So I got really fascinated with this whole thing of how different kinds of minds think. Well, they kind of come up into my mind like Google for images. I can have childhood one. I can have local ones in Fort Collins where I live. I can have famous ones, some more famous ones. There's North Church in Boston, some more famous ones. And I could also have cathedrals. I could have chapels. I could have New England churches. You see, concepts are formed bottom up. You take specific pictures and put them in categories. Put the dogs in one category, the cats in another category. Then I can sort them out by the different kinds of dogs. And the astrophysics professor, when I asked him, saw no images at all. He saw motion and movement of people praying, kind of abstract patterns. I go, oh wow, that's a trippy, man. Really, really trippy. Now, being a visual thinker was really helpful in my work designing cattle facilities because I could test run it in my head. I didn't know other people couldn't test run it in their head. And the thing is, it was a real weird gig. No one wanted to talk to me. So how did I get my business started? One little tiny thing at a time. The first thing was writing for the Farmer Ranchman magazine. And people thought it was weird, but I got a reputation for writing really accurate articles. I covered the Arizona cattle feeders meeting. It was covered accurately. And then my designing, one little project at a time. And how do you sell jobs? Well, you show off pictures of things that you've designed. That's how you sell jobs. And I'd show people my drawings. Boy, they thought I was weird. But when I showed them my drawings, we've actually got a pretty nice projector here, show them my drawings, then I got respect by selling my work. It was a lot of hard work getting a business started. There's been other people on the spectrum doing this. I'd like to see more of getting businesses started. And it happened very slowly. And then I wrote for the national magazines. And then I had this valuable press pass, the Arizona Farmer Ranchman. I could get into the National Cattlemen's Meeting for free when it was right in Phoenix, Arizona, where I lived. You know, it's a lot of hard work. I was just at a USDA meeting yesterday, and there's a quote from Stephen King, and it said, talent, yeah, you can have talent, but you got to do a lot of hard work to achieve, and I don't think that's the exact quote, but that's basically what it said. You got to develop the things you're good at. I spent 3 years just learning how to design cattle handling equipment. I went to every feed yard in Arizona. There was about 20 of them. I went to a whole bunch of feed yards in Texas, and I took all the good bits, and I combined them all together into new systems, chucked out the bad bits, and then designed some new things. And that scene in the movie with the metal plate where the cattle drowned, that actually happened. You know, that was not a good scene. And there's the dipping vat system that I designed for the John Wayne feed yard. It was the John Wayne feed yard. Very proud of that. But as you start your business, one little job at a time. The other thing, because I know we're supposed to talk about some business stuff, I've been following the Chrysler, turnaround. Boy, this guy, this Italian guy, he shut down the executive suite. Boy, I can tell you, I was, get rid of all those stupid suits over there. He wasn't going to be a stupid suit, and he set up shop in the engineering department. It's all about the product. Steve Jobs is all about the product. And then today in Business Week magazine, the new Business Week, I was reading about the guy who started Chobani, the yogurt company. Poor Turkish immigrant, came to New York to learn English, bought an old craft factory, an old junky craft factory, worked really hard to get the perfect product, stuck it out in the store, and it just took off because it was a really good product. You know, I get worried now when you get the financial people taking stuff over and they wreck the product. In fact, the CEO of McDonald's said, and this is the one that likes put in the cafes and all really nice stuff, it's a lot harder to make money than it is to count it. You know, to make money, really doing some real stuff. Now, I teach a class where my students have to do a drawing of a cattle handling facility. And I got a lot of students that are going to become dog and cat veterinarians. They probably are not going to do stuff with cattle. But they're going to have to figure out how to design a cattle facility. I said, think of it as practical problem solving. It's not all cookbook. It's not all multiple guess. I'm going to give you some rules, and then you got to figure out how to design it. Now, one of the things I had to learn was how to get the pictures in my head to relate to a drawing. Okay, there's the actual facility, taking advantage of the tendency to go back to where they come from, and there's the drawing. And you've got to learn how to relate drawing to the actual thing, and that took some time. And I had a great big blueprint for the whole entire Swift plant, and I walked around in this Swift plant, and I found, okay, you got a round circle like that column, that's a little round circle on the drawing. You'd have 3 little round circles where those columns are. Great big circle was the water tower. On this little thing like this, that was a door. But I had to learn how to relate every line on that drawing to the real thing. Now, I noticed a very weird thing. When the industry went from hand drawing to computers, and when the old folks went over to computers, everything was fine. But then we started getting a lot of young students coming in, 22-year-old guy, got a 2-year community college degree. He's doing drawings now for a major meat company. I started getting weird drawings. Things like the center of the circle's not in the center of the circle. Weird mistakes. Gates that didn't swing right. They weren't seeing their drawings. They were perceptual errors. I have drawings like this from every single major meat company. And then I'd call them up and I'd get this guy on the phone, and I'd just chat him up. And I go, first I kind of chat him up, find out when he graduated from school and find out how old he was. And then I said, did you ever learn hand drafting? No. Did you ever build anything? No. That's why they couldn't see their drawings. In fact, you got to touch to see. Oliver Sacks has got a fascinating chapter about a guy who got his vision back as a grown-up, been blind from birth. And he had to touch to see. He saw his own pet. He didn't know what this black and white thing was until he touched it. He had to learn how to see. And interestingly enough, I've been out to Pixar, been to Disney Imagineering, been to a lot of cool places, Google, places like this. And I got to talking to people at Disney Imagineering and Pixar about hand drawing. And at Pixar, they do a lot of hand drawing. Buzz Lightyear started as pictures pinned to the wall in the hallway. And then I went out, when I went over to Disney Imagineering, went in a room where they were doing a lot of 3D art. And people now have these things called a 3D printer, where you can draw a three-dimensional drawing of something, and then the 3D printer makes you a little plastic model of it. Really cool. And you can even make models with moving parts, like you can make little gates that swing. There's a company from Australia that makes a product called Safer Gate, help cut down on accidents with gates. You actually had a little Safer Gate printed out in the 3D printer that actually worked. It's just amazing what this can do. And what I noticed when I went to these design studios is, where did people put their little plastic models? Right there next to their computers where they can touch. Got to touch to see. Thought that's really interesting. Now, here's a picture a young autistic kid did. There tends to be uneven skills. You got a kid with some kind of label. Build on the area of strength. My ability in art was always encouraged. And I was encouraged to do lots of different things. If the kid's fixated on the subway system or something like that, well, let's do math with it. Let's do reading with it. Let's learn how a train works. How does an electric train actually work? Broaden it out. I would have just drawn endless horse heads, but I was encouraged to draw other things. Maybe draw where you ride the horse to. Draw a stable. Or they're drawing endless anime. Let's do anime's car. Let's do anime's house. Okay, I used to joke around that I had a huge, huge internet trunk line deep going into my visual cortex. And yeah, I do. Visual cortex sits all the way in the back of the brain. That's where it is. And take another slice up here. Yep, I've got a great big thing. I go, oh, wow, man. That explains visual thinking. That explains why I can do 3D, full motion video in my head. And then I had some other scans done at Utah. This was done at the University of Pittsburgh back in 2006. And Utah, they found out my entorhinal cortex was bigger than normal. And memory researchers call it the golden gateway to the memory mainframe. Okay, now I want to get into a different kind of thinking. This is the mathematician mind, not my mind, the mathematician. That praying mantis is made out of a single sheet of folded paper. No cutting, no tape. What you see in the background is the folding pattern. It's sure not my mind. Now the thing is, uneven skills, good at one thing and bad at something else. My thing is visual thinking. I couldn't do algebra. And there's a lot of people that can't do algebra, but they can do geometry. And recently, I was up at North Dakota State University, and I went to the local school. They wanted to show me their autism program, and we were walking through the elementary school, and I looked in the window of the third grade classroom, and they were doing geometry. And they had a plastic template. I go, oh man, cool. I want to see what they're doing in that third grade classroom. And we went in there, and they got this great book. It's called Everyday Math. It's a great program. It was just fabulous. And it had some algebra. It had some word problems. It had, and it wasn't some new math crazy thing. It was just really, really good. And they had this little template, and they were drawing all these different shapes. And the mistake that was made with me in my education is they pounded away on algebra and never went to geometry. That was a total, absolute, gigantic mistake. And one of the reasons why I can't do algebra is my working memory is full of water. In fact, I got a new book coming out called The Autistic Brain. It'll be coming out in May. It'll be showing a lot of other brain scans. You're going to see a nice, it's like turquoise blue where the water is. It will be black and white in the book. And I go, yeah, my working memory's trashed. I also cannot remember long strings of verbal information. And I still can't remember that. Let the person write it down. There's problems with multitasking. This is a reason why I don't want flash pictures and stuff during my talk, because it distracts me. Afterwards, question and answer, you can do it, fine. Then there's a math thinker. These kids often have trouble with reading. This is a little kid where might be in a third grade and he needs a high school math book. Well, then give him that high school math book. And we got to make sure the bureaucrats don't run amok here, because I've seen too much problem where I was at school. I think I won't say where it was because I'm really going to trash them right now. This high school kid was 1 credit short on advanced placement in math in high school because he had to take special ed in reading. They made him do baby math and baby stuff. He got bored. That's bureaucracy run amok. Come on, people. He should have been in the advanced placement. And then you got verbal people who are good at writing. And we need verbal people. See, verbal people are more linear. My kind of thinking is associative. It's associative thinking. I was reading in the paper today on the plane an article about dog food. That people want to put apples and rice and stuff like that in it because they don't want to have the chicken byproducts. Well, you know, chicken byproducts is guts. So I got to thinking, you want the dog to be natural. I just thinking of a great advertising thing. Let's just have a dog food named Guts. And let your dog get in touch with his inner wolf. Well, the guts are the best part. The wolves really like to eat. Yeah, we can put it right on the label. First ingredient, chicken guts, instead of chicken byproducts, because that's what it is. And that's what wolves actually eat. The guts are the first thing they slurp up. A little associative thinking. The top-down people are going to go, oh, there's no way that would work. Can you imagine when the movie was being pitched to the marketing department, they wanted to do a movie on an autistic slaughter plant designer? Well, hell no, what the suits would have think of that. Well, it's done really super well. We'll tell you a little about the movie. Emily Gerson-Sains is the mother of an autistic child, and she was the one behind the movie, and then hiring Mick Jackson and Claire Danes. That was absolutely a stroke of genius. Okay, just to show you there's different ways to do algebra. The verbal way or the visual spatial way. See, in your brain, let's just go back to this for a minute. The photoballistic visual thinking, there's circuits in the brain for what is something. And then the circuit in the brain is for where is something. And I have a lot more of the what is something. But when you're really extremely good at one thing, you tend to be bad at something else. And some of these people that have got these uneven skills will be fantastic at business. I get worried at them being locked out of the system. And they're going to end up on Social Security playing video games. And I'm serious, and I'm seeing too many smart kids that haven't been challenged enough. They can't go into a McDonald's and order food. They don't know how to shake hands. They'll come up to me afterwards and grab me in all kinds of inappropriate ways because nobody has just taught them what to do. And one advantage of growing up in the 50s, boy, kids were taught manners. They were taught manners. And the rules were the same at the Woods house and the Culvers. Oh, the Culvers were more strict. Oh, Mrs. Culver said, well, you can't cut all the meat up all at once. You know, you've got to cut one off at a time. Okay, so to form a concept, I got to take specific examples and put it in categories. For an autistic kid, everything is learned by specific example. Like if you want to teach the word down, give several different examples. You go down the stairs. You lay down on the bed. The plane went down and landed. The ball dropped down. So you're giving specific examples. Everything is learned by specific example. Use your teachable moments. Okay, if you're in the restaurant or you're in the store buying something and you didn't say thank you to the clerk, then cue them to say thank you to the clerk. Dogs make categories. When I'm on the leash, I protect my owner, and when I'm off the leash, I can go play. And service dogs make categories. It's very, very important that when the vest is on, it's work. We don't roll over and show private parts with the vest on. We don't jump on people with the breast on or lick their, one dog liked to lick sandaled feet. People don't really care much for that. That's not proper behavior. But there needs to be a very clear vest on is work, vest off is play. You want to make sure the categories are very clear to the dog. Cattle make categories. Man on a horse, oh, I'm used to the man on the horse. I won't be afraid of that. But when they see that first man on foot, they're taken off. But think about it. A man on foot is a totally different picture than a man on a horse. It's very important to train your dogs when they're puppies. Toddlers are people too, because this little tiny person may not be viewed as a person to the dog. How do you think about a vacuum cleaner? How do you think about it? Well, most people just see their own vacuum cleaner, but I saw my elementary school play. So how did I get from elementary school play to vacuum cleaner? Because when I was a little kid in elementary school, and I went to the Dedham Country Day School, they had this vacuum cleaner. It must have been this big looking to me as a little kid, and this high, with a giant bag like this. It was going to suck me up. I was terrified of it. And it was kept in the closet in the assembly hall where we had the school play. Okay, you see the associative link? You see, autistic thinking is associative, but also creative thinking is associative. We need these kind of thinkers. Now, I need to have the linear thinkers because I worked with Richard Panik on the autistic brain, Katherine Johnson on some of my animal books. I got to have the more linear writer to give me the right structure because I tend to wander all around. Also, I've got to make sure I give Richard credit. We've got a great chapter on genetics, and Richard did some real heavy lifting on that. But I find that I've got to have that writer for the structure. Now, scientific papers, I've written plenty of those myself, but they're very structured. You're allowed a 200-word introduction, methods, and then you got to break it into animals, statistics, how you did the experiment, then the results, and then the discussion, and the acknowledgments, and the reference list. See, that's the structure. Now, I find that a lot of normal people have problems categorizing problems. When we're out in the plant and something starts to go wrong, have I got something wrong with how people are using equipment? Or is there something wrong with the equipment? Okay, we got a child with a behavior problem. Is it biology? Like maybe he has a sensory problem, or maybe he has a medical problem that's hurting, or is it behavior? I find people have a hard time doing that, but you really want to troubleshoot, you need to be separating out behavior from biology. And then if I got a design problem, is it a big design problem, or is it a glitch? People don't differentiate. Okay, if it's a meat plant, do I have a stuck trolley? That's a glitch. Yeah, it causes a pile of downtime. It's a glitch. They don't differentiate. Okay, BP had a ton of safety rules. Boy, you go visit one of their oil rigs, you better have a lid on your coffee cup. You might fall in the break room. You might break it. Took this off. Yes, they did a great job of getting rid of the little accidents. Well, they forgot about the stuff that's really important. And they were congratulating themselves on what a wonderful job they did on the slips and falls right when this happened. They were doing a lot of sloppy stuff. I'm not going to go into all the engineering stuff they did wrong. It was just sloppy stuff. Rush, 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 get it done quickly, cut a bunch of corners. Now, both people with autism and animals are bottom-up thinkers, not top-down. I really want to get you thinking about bottom-up thinking. It's the opposite of how most people think. Most people get the hypothesis or the theory first, then they jam all the information in. And one of the big problems I think we got in government today is what I call abstractification. You've got people in charge of agencies that don't know about anything going on in the field. And then they can get a degree in public administration, and they really don't know anything about what's going on the ground. Because let's say you make a policy on health care. You need to be going, what happens to Susie Q over here? What about Jimmy over here? What about this old lady over here? What about this little kid over here with a handicap? What's going to happen? You see, that's thinking more specific. I think we need to be getting a bit more bottom-up thinking. Bottom-up thinkers form their concepts by categorizing specific examples. And if you're working with autistic kids, this is a really important concept. You really have got to understand this. Top-down forms the concept first. Jam all the data into it. Bottom-up thinking makes it much easier to put information into different categories, like maybe equipment problem or a training issue. The world needs to have the different kinds of minds working together. And when different minds work together, they can really complement each other's skills. Let's take something like the iPhone. Steve Jobs was an artist, and then the engineers had to make the engineering part work. And they worked really well together, except for the iPhone 4's antenna, where pretty kind of overrode, roughshod over antenna design. Touching the antenna with your hands, a no-no. So you got to put a case on the iPhone 4 to fix that problem. Didn't quite work together the way they should have. But overall, they did a great job of working together. Another thing that they did is they made it really simple. Like Google was successful because they made this simple thing where you just comes up to the search box and you just type stuff in it. There's nothing to learn. That's why they were so successful. I had a great science teacher when I was in high school because I was a goofball student that just didn't study. I got kicked out of a school, 9th grade, fairly close to here. And because a girl teased me, I chucked a book at her, beamed her on the head with a book. I got kicked out of school for that. I ended up going to Hampshire Country School up in New Hampshire, out in the farm. And I didn't do very much studying there, but boy, I learned a lot of work skills. Every day I cleaned 8 horse stalls. I fed the horses. I shingled the barn roof. I built all kinds of stuff. I wasn't studying, but I was learning work skills. I'm seeing too many kids today not learning any work skills. And this needs to start in middle school. How about walking dogs for people? How about mowing some lawns? Making PowerPoint presentations? Working in a farmer's market? And this would, it's called work. Sometimes you just got to do it. Now I know the paper routes are all gone, but there's a lot of people on the mild end of the spectrum, dyslexic, ADHD, or whatever, that had paper routes when they were 12, and they managed to get employed. See, the problem we've got with a lot of these labels today is I think they're doing a fabulous job with the more severe individuals, the ones that are not going to be able to live independently. But you get the ones on the milder end of the spectrum, they've had so many accommodations, they haven't learned how to do anything themselves. And I think we've got to start learning work skills. I mean, doing stuff outside the home. Walk those dogs every day. And I'm getting concerned our educational system's failing to stimulate the mathematical thinker and the visual thinker. We're not valuing, we're getting much more social oriented, everything social kind of stuff. We've taken the hands-on classes out of the schools. A lot of schools have shut down, like auto shop and wood shop and sewing and home ec, because you can teach math with those things. Think of what you can do with cooking. Well, we're not going to double the recipe. We're going to do it 2/3. That's going to require some math. This is an old paper, but there's quite a few educators getting worried that we're overlooking this stuff. I talked to a retired NASA space scientist that had an autistic grandson. He told me half the people at NASA probably were a bit on the spectrum. And if you saw the latest Mars rover landing, you had the Mohawk guy, you had the Elvis guy, and you had ancient old hippie. I think that's sort of, they found being different heaven where they were. They were lucky. Okay, already mentioned, it's a shame they've taken out so many of these hands-on classes. It's one of the worst things they ever did. We need people like electricians. We have a shortage in this country right now of diesel mechanics, auto mechanics, electricians, utility workers, heating and air conditioning. You do like to have electricity on in this place. And the power went off during the Super Bowl. You need to have people that can fix that stuff. Well, I think they kind of overloaded the substation. But you have to have a very intelligent person to get that back on, or somebody's going to get fried. And the Super Bowl would have been over if you hadn't had a hands-on person to get that stuff back on. These are the things that are my salvation. Art class in elementary school, carpentry and horseback riding. This is the stuff that just saved me. And I read an interesting article in New York Times about an aviation high school in New York. And the kids get to take an old jet engine apart, put it back together. And they also get plenty of academics, real rigorous academics, but with an airplane, emphasis, which gets the boys motivated. Now I want to talk about some sensory issues that happen in conjunction with a lot of different labels. And you got to remember these labels are behavioral profiles. You can get it with dyslexia, ADHD, head injuries, get some of these same sensory problems as developmental differences. Sound sensitivity. When I was a little kid, I hated balloons popping. Another problem I have is even though my hearing is normal, I don't hear hard consonant sounds. I cannot tell cat, bat, and rat. I can't tell those words apart. I have to do it by context. There's a lot of noise in here. People having me sign books. Okay, somebody named Vivian comes up. Yeah, I can know that name. But unfortunately, a lady came up with a foreign name. I have no idea what it is. But I probably only hear Ian. But I know that name. So I'm able to figure that out from the context. So when you're working with these little kids, slow down. Slow down and enunciate the hard consonants. Really, really important. Because another brain scan done on me showed that my language output circuit, really, really, really small in bandwidth. So this is the circuit, say what you see, and say what you hear. That was a little tiny piece of shrimp compared to the controls. This attention shifting slowness. Like if a cell phone goes off or someone makes a flash, it attracts my attention. It takes me much longer to shift back. This is something I still have a problem with. This is the reason for no pictures and stuff during my talk. You can do all the pictures you want during questions, and afterwards you can do all the flash, doesn't bother me then. Some people that get labeled dyslexic, when they go to read, they see the print jiggle on the page. I am finding 1 out of 50 in my class for livestock handling. These students can't draw. Like if I ask them to draw a circle, this is what they draw. They can't just go, they'll draw scribbles. They just draw scribbles. And I get these drawings that are just scribbles. And then I ask them some screening questions. I say, you ever see the print jiggle on the page? Do you hate fluorescent lights? Do you see them flicker? Do you hate driving at night? Do you hate escalators because you can't tell how to get on and off them? And this can vary from something that causes eye strain to really, really wrecking reading. I'll tell you some simple things you can do. Laptops and tablets, they're the best. They don't flicker. Also, no fluorescent lights, get away from that. Using colored glasses, like the Irwin lenses, pale pink, pale blue. Talk to a lot of people in low-income areas, and Walmart's got a lot of glasses that will work. You just got to try them on. Try printing homework on different pastel papers. Sometimes works. I'm seeing too many talented, quirky students that are just kind of different, going nowhere. Because we don't have the shop teacher to get the kid around, or they get the kid turned around, or the mechanics guy. Illinois just shut down all their funding for FFA programs. That's Future Farmers of America. That's horrible. That's an agricultural state. What are they thinking of? We're going to need to have people to grow food. I go out to agricultural meetings, and I sit in the back, and it's all gray hair. Find that kind of discouraging. You know, there's a lot of people getting interested in some of the niche markets. That's where I'm seeing some young people. But we're going to need some young people in conventional ag, too. Okay, let's talk about some real business stuff. You know, when the economy crashed, you know, graduates from MIT and Harvard, mathematicians, were getting snapped up by financial companies to make garbage like derivatives and credit default swaps. Do you want it on your resume when you die, near your funeral, you were the inventor of the credit default swap? That's not something to be proud of, that's something to be ashamed of. And I've just been reading the latest scandal about Standard & Poor's. Yeah, they were getting paid, you know, so that was Fox Garden Hen House, big time. And we got to get back in this country to doing what I call real stuff. And the guy at Chrysler and the guy at Chobani, he says, I make stuff. That's doing real stuff. Let's look at companies that are really, really successful. McDonald's really got turned around. Oh, they're making those cafes. I mean, that's real stuff. You know, Steve Jobs, that's real stuff. His motto was, I make products that people don't know they want until they see them. That was his motto. And you get, you know, and I look at the companies that are really, really successful. They're usually not run by a finance person or a lawyer. Yes, you need to have those people, but they're not the real leaders. And there's a tendency, I've seen a lot of companies, and I'm not going to go into names because they'd be names that you'd know, niche market companies that have been ruined when the founder either died or he sold it to, you know, the financial guys got a hold of it and they sucked all the blood out of it and ruined it. Cheapened things up. You know, there's a place to cut costs, but then there's a point where you cut product quality. Now, I have to wear clothes that don't itch. And I have problems with a lot of dyes and things making me break out. And I was a big fan of Old Navy khakis. And I used to just sing the praises of Old Navy. Well, they must have changed vendors because I hate them now. They itch and they're scratchy and they changed it. I'm never going to shop there again. And I used to just sing their praises. They cheapened up their product. Let's take Kmart, because I have a real problem with pants. And I used to get these pants at Kmart. They were like a stretchy, thin denim with a little bit of lycra, and you could get them in black, grays, light blue, and then regular and black. And they were the greatest thing. And then I'd go in there, and they were not in my size, because I have a very, very common size. So I don't shop at Kmart anymore. But I went to Walmart. I think I got these came from Walmart, and I hope they don't cheapen them up. But it's a real problem. I've got problems with things against my skin, and these shirts, I wear another shirt under this that's been washed a whole bunch of times. And the thing that I found, because some of this clothing things can really be a problem, is you can have T-shirts. I get given a lot of T-shirts. Some are nice and soft, and some are scratchy and awful. And they're all 100% cotton. I don't know what they did to them, but there sure is a difference. Well, this is something where, okay, Old Navy just lost a customer. And I've talked to other people that used to buy those, and he goes, oh yeah, they are more scratchy, aren't they? Now the thing we're concerned about today, this is really disgusting. We spend more money in this country fighting over patents than we do making patents. Something is really wrong here. That's just terrible. We're losing $80 billion a year to patent trolls. These are people that buy up patents. Well, the polite word is non-practicing entities. Well, I'm going to use the rude term, patent trolls. Because this is just kind of a leech on the economy. They're not making a product with these things. It's just sucking blood out of the people that do actually make things. Now, my grandfather was the co-inventor of the automatic pilot for airplanes. Yes, and he got royalties off of that and deserved it. Actually, some of his patents got ripped off. But he made enough royalties to live in a very beautiful apartment on Memorial Drive in Cambridge. Yes, that's what a patent is for. It was not patent trolling. He spent years in the attic of a garage that did maintenance on trolley cars in Springfield, Massachusetts, figuring out with another man named Andrew Nickian how to make the automatic pilot for airplanes. That's the whole point of patents. Not people just suing people on patents they're not using. Okay, $80 billion. And this is a Boston Law School article. What's $80 billion? Now we just bandy these big amounts of money around. I like to visualize it. $80 billion could build me 16 Denver airports. When that stimulus money came out in 2008, right after the economy crashed, you could have built 2 Denver airports in every state with that money. Now, I travel all around everywhere. I've only seen one big project, and that's the Golden Gate Bridge entrances. And I've seen a lot of little piddly projects. I'm very, very tuned into construction work. And I look at the signs to say who's funding construction work. I think it's money evaporated into a black hole somewhere. See, one of the things about being a visual thinker, I'm not abstract. I like to see money turn into what I call tangible assets. You know, things like roads. It really ticks me off as I travel around and the rebar's all rusted out on a bridge. You know, our infrastructure's falling apart. Our power plants are falling apart. Yeah, that's called deferred maintenance in the industry. I saw somebody do that to a meatpacking plant. It wrecked it. They were just sucking the blood out. Now, here 3M was moving some of the R&D offshore because we can't get enough people interested in science. I just read a really disgusting article today on the plane. I buy the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. I do kind of mix them up now. And I think they've tried to get more like each other, so they're easier to mix up now. But it was a study on girls in science. And we were the worst country on girls in science. And some country in the Middle East was the best. Couldn't believe it. And we need to be getting more kids interested in science and things. But one of the ways to do that is the hands-on classes in the schools. Well, this guy down on Wall Street, you know what? We need to grab his horns, and I think maybe we need to grab him somewhere else. And we've got to get back to doing real stuff. I'm a child of the 50s. I can remember Route 128 when they were building Route 128. That's real stuff the Republicans did. And the Democrats went to the moon. It was bipartisan, doing stuff. Now they just fight. You know what? Have you ever seen that movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers? Where you turn into pods when you go to sleep? Well, I think when people go into DC, I think they turn into pods. And they can't get stuff done anymore. Now, there's some of my books, and we're going to do some questions now, but I like to put this guy up here because I want to think about grabbing him somewhere else. So that's what I'd like to do. Yeah, we're going to do questions. You got mics there. You're going to just have them come up. Yeah, we got a mic, so. Well, I'm going to pick somebody if nobody has any questions, so. Okay.
Oh, all right. Do you think it's worthwhile to learn skills that might not fit into your way of thinking?
Okay, that's a good question. So you learn skills that don't fit your way of thinking. The thing is, more people that are kind of in the middle are you know, more even in what they can do. Trying to jam algebra down my throat, that was just impossible. We should have gone to geometry. One thing I've tried to do is to try to imagine better. You know, I've tried to learn how to communicate with someone who's more linear. I've learned a lot from my editors. When I did my book, Thinking in Pictures, Betsy Lerner was my editor. She's now my agent, but she was my editor then. And what Betsy didn't line edit anything, but boy, she rearranged stuff. She cut out where I repeated stuff. And by having my work copy edited, I learned a lot. What you need to learn is how, you gotta understand enough about different kinds of thinking to see where you fit in. And I think we need to be thinking more about different kinds of thinking. There's kind of this PC correctness that everybody's the same. You know, and everybody's not the same. And you look at some very successful products. You know, that nuclear power plant needed someone like me working on safety systems. Because I can start thinking about ways people could break it. I can't guard against if someone deliberately wants to wreck the plant. I can't stop that. But the stupid things that could, like this thing with the water, that is a mistake that I would never make. I don't know how to build a nuclear reactor, but I do know that diesel generators and electric pumps with non-waterproof motors don't run underwater. We know that in the meat industry. That's why we have separate equipment rooms to put this stuff in, so it doesn't get wet, you know, because it doesn't work. So, you know, I would probably, in your case, what I'd have to do is find out more on what your career, what you want to do. But I think the important thing is recognizing that there are different ways of thinking. Now, even though I'm not big on the accounting stuff, I still got to have an accounting department. Because the problem with my kind of mind is it gets too scattered. So things like making sure that we get paid for stuff and collecting the money, that tends to be something I'm not so good at. So I have an accountant for that. You know, okay, you got a question back there?
Okay. Hi. First, I wanted to say thank you for your extreme honesty. And I wanted to ask if thinking visually has helped you gain any kind of understanding of people and their behavior. Because looking around at my own actions and those of others, I find that a lot of them, a lot of the time, in purely rational analysis, don't make a whole lot of sense.
Well, I know, you see, the thing is, there's a place for visual thinking. I've been looking at this whole mess with this Dreamliner plane and this battery. Well, I don't particularly want to fly with that battery. And they're going through a verbal risk analysis right now on the electronics on the airplane. And I've been through similar risk analysis stuff on cattle handling. Okay, I can just start visualizing. You unload the truck, they come off the truck, you weigh them, you pen them, they go up the chute, they go through the stunner, you know, then we bleed them, then we cut the front feet off. It's kind of gross. I'm actually visualizing the whole plant, and then I'm like looking at different plants I've been in, and I can see where there's risk areas. But when you try to do this verbally, they go through a real complicated verbal thing. I mean, let's get back to that battery. Okay, what could make that battery burn up? It's got manufacturing defects. It got an overload of power. It should have a circuit breaker in there to stop that. It got shorted, a dead short. There should be something built into the battery to stop that. It's very limited as to what the plane's electrical system can do to that battery. It could get drained too fast, but that shouldn't burn it up. There's not very many things a plane's electrical system can do to the battery. And if that plane is certified to fly 3 hours away from an airport, and it's underneath the cockpit floor catching on fire, I don't think we're going to make it to the nearest airport. You see, I'm visualizing this. And until I get this battery, my inclination would be just get rid of the battery for now. But no, they're going to go through this whole complicated verbal risk analysis of the plane's electronics. Or you design the battery, so even if the electronics screws up, there's no way that battery's going to catch on fire. Because when lithium-ion battery catches on fire, it puts out oxygen. So how are you going to put it out? The fire department, when the one that was on the ground, had to cut it loose with the jaws of life because it melted the bolts, the mounting bolts, and throw it out the door. Yuck, you're not going to do that up in the air. But see, this is where the visual thinking is very valuable for certain kinds of thinking. You know, but you also have to go, do I have a battery problem, or is there really something wrong with the plane's electronics? It seemed like the plane's electronics has worked fine. And the other problem you've got is an exceedingly complicated system, and you can't predict everything it's going to do. You need to put safeguards into the battery so if it gets a power surge, or if it got shorted, or it got drained too fast, it's not going to catch on fire. That's the important thing.
I met you, Temple, 2005 in San Jose at the Association of Pet Dog Training. It was one of Trish King's seminars there. And there was, I don't know, thousands of people there talking about dogs and training and so forth and animals. And when you spoke tonight, you said that when you were in high school, that horse picture, you said those animals saved you. Those horses sort of saved you. And I wondered how you exactly bring that animal saving part into you. How do you see that as animals bringing something completely unique? Well, and all those people at APDD were also having a similar experience, it seems. That
well, the thing is, one of the reasons they saved me, and I say this all the time, you know, I got teased horribly. Even when I went to the Hampshire Country School, I got teased. I was called tape recorder and bones because I was really skinny, and tape recorder because I always said the same things all the time. It was just terrible. And when I was doing the specialized activities like horseback riding, the kids that did those activities did not tease. Those were refuges away from teasing. This is one of the reasons why I think it's so important to get kids involved in these specialized activities like Boy Scouts. There's things now called maker community groups. We need to be limiting the video game playing, not banning it, but it's got to be limited. You know, I'm not against technology, but I am against 8 hours a day of doing this. 8 hours a day of learning how to program a game. I'm all for that. We've got to get a lot more oriented on getting them working. And I think they have over there at the bookstore a little book by Cy Montgomery called Temple Grandin. And it's got a lot of pictures and drawings, and how it also talks about how I got my business started. And I'm really getting into the business stuff because I'm seeing too many smart kids today going nowhere. All the old Aspies, built jobs with them. Built jobs with them. They're all gray hairs now. Okay, sorry, I couldn't see you.
What's your favorite thing that you like to do with horses?
One of the things I really liked to do was out in my aunt's ranch. And we would just go riding up on the hills and out there in the country. I really, really liked doing that.
So I was diagnosed with Asperger's when I was 5. I'm 16 now. And my mind, I feel like, is a bit fluid between the 4 different sorts of minds.
You see, they can be mixtures.
And at some points, it's like different chunks, and it sort of changes what goes on in it.
Okay, let's start.
Do you think that the 4 different kinds of minds could be seen as more of like quadrants or a spectrum or an overall sort of sea of possibility?
Well, yes, they can be, and you can get mixtures of different things. You know, some people are more, one or the other, but there can be mixtures. I've seen people where the visual thinking and the mathematical thinking are mixed together. That's actually the way Einstein's mind was. Then there's some people that are pure word thinkers, and they're not a visual thinker. I mean, it can be very variable. You know, it's only in the extreme. I'm a very extreme in visual thinking, and very super bad in algebra, and a lot of people, you can get mixtures. The other thing in trying to figure out what kids are good at, I go, what was your favorite subject in school? What are things that you're good at? When kids are in 3rd grade and they're good at art, they're going to be drawing. We need to be encouraging that. Both the visual thinkers and the math thinkers like Legos. The math thinkers will get good at doing math stuff. Don't just force them to do baby math. Give them more challenging stuff. Word thinkers are good at writing. Well, there's somebody over here, right here, that's got a question.
I think there's a myth about many of us spectrum people think we're all visual, mathematical.
You're not all visual. I made that very clear. I've made that very, very clear.
I never have been. I'm very word and auditory mostly, and I wish there were more for us who are not so visual and spatial, anything like that, like work skills or work wise and whatever.
Well, then this gets into the whole thing of jobs. And, you know, I've seen journalists that I know are on the spectrum. That's a word job. Another thing that word people be good at is just specialty retail. Any kind of specialized product where you've got to know, okay, maybe you just work in the iPhone store, and you don't have to know how the phones work, but boy, you can explain every model, you know everything about them. That's a good field. Anything to do with record keeping, usually you'd be good at. Those would be good, real accurate in record keeping. You know, we got to start thinking about, you know, the whole job thing. The other mistake that's getting made by a lot of the voc rehab people is they don't differentiate between someone on a much lower level, where maybe janitor work's the proper thing to teach them, and somebody that ought to be in higher level stuff. But the other problem I'm seeing is a lot of individuals today, they haven't learned how to work. And while I was goofing around in high school, one thing I did learn was how to work. Those horses had to be fed every day. They had to be put in and out of the barn. I had to clean their stalls every day. You know, and I wanted to do it. I learned how to work. Being on time, seeing too many problems with that. Time management, too many problems.
When you were designing the dip vats, what made you kind of know how, like, the angles of the dip vats were going to make the cows comfortable?
How did I do the angles? Well, you see, I've been to all these feed yards. And I really, you know, I've been to maybe 25 or 30 feed yards. And the feed yards with good facilities. So I took a lot of good ideas and put them together. And then I had a lucky break on making the dip vats. And I didn't know anything about dip vats. And I had the feedlot manager come up to me at a fair, at a county fair, and asked me if I'd design a dip vat for him. And I go, give me 3 weeks. Because I had to learn about dip vats. So then I was going around to every single dip vat and measuring them. And I got a hold of some people I knew in Washington that had the concrete specs, the engineering specs, like the rebar spacing and stuff like that. I didn't know how to do that. So I had to get the engineering specs. And then the idea of the way the entrance is, I invented that entrance. That was my design. But there are other things, the USDA has some rules about dip vats. It took me a week just to get all the stuff because there was no internet back in the 70s. Now, I didn't tell the manager of the feed yard I didn't know anything about dip vats. I said, give me 3 weeks. See, too often times people get too scared and, no, that door opened, I took it. And there was a lot of dip vats that had to be built because we had a scabies outbreak. And that was an example of a lucky break, where a whole pile of jobs just came right in. And when that door opened, I went for it. Yeah, I made sure I learned about dip vats. I went around to every single dip vat. I had a big stick with a tape measure on it. I'd stick it down there and measured them all. I watched them work. What was bad stuff? What was good stuff? Well, I made myself knowledgeable.
Hi, I have a question right here in the middle of the room.
Okay.
Hi, right here. My question is, I know we've talked a lot about different individuals who may or may not be higher functioning, and my question is, what is your opinion about how we teach teachers or the greater community about the individuals with autism who may be somewhat lower functioning, not necessarily your most severe, who struggle with language but have almost savant-like skills?
We need to use their savant-like skills. And I've seen some very good things where you had a savant-like person very good at art. Extremely good at art.
But what about technology, which we keep talking about, not letting them get stuck on technology?
Well, it depends I'm not against technology.
Right.
What I'm against is getting addicted to video games.
Right.
There's a big difference between using an iPad to communicate and getting addicted to video games. That's not the same thing.
Right.
But I'm seeing too many of them where they're turning into recluses. And one thing they did not allow me when I went up to Hampshire Country School is become a recluse in my room. Right. Yeah, they let me take care of the horses, but that was out doing things. And when I didn't want to go to movie night because I was too nervous, they made me projectionist. They made me, I had to attend classes. I didn't do any studying, but I had to attend classes. That taught me to be on time. You see, what's happening with some of these kids is they're becoming recluses playing video games. I'm not against technology. But let's, another thing I did when I was in high school is we had an electronics lab. And we did things like stretch rubber sheets on speakers and glue little bits of mirror on that to make a light show with sound waves. There's all kinds of things you can do with technology, but what you don't want to be doing is zoning out on it.
Right.
You know, we've got to be thinking about, you might have somebody that's nonverbal that can work in an office running the copying machine.
I just find by taking time away sometimes from technology so they don't become recluses or...
Well, listen, the word technology is way too vague.
Right.
That's way too vague. And when I talk about video game, I'm not talking about Wii Fit here.
No, no, no.
I'm talking about little controller here, shoot 'em up. That's all, they become a recluse doing that. Let's talk about things much more specifically. If that iPad is enabling someone to communicate, that's wonderful. I want to encourage that.
Right, it's just you have to channel them to use it that way. And
But you don't let them stim on it all day. I was allowed to have an hour after lunch where I could spin a brass plate round and round and round on the bedpost. That was a 50s video game. And I was allowed to do that for 1 hour. I think it's okay to give the kids some downtime where they can veg out and do this stuff, but that's 1 hour a day. That's not 8 hours a day. And I was not allowed to do this kind of stuff at the dinner table. You know, and there are some individuals with very severe sensory issues where they can't screen out the background noise, and they've got to have breaks. And if you're working with individuals that remain nonverbal and you want to understand those severe sensory problems, you might want to read Tito's book, How Can I Talk If My Lips Don't Move? And Carly's Voice. These are two nonverbal people with autism that type independently, documented to type totally independently, and they describe sensory jumbling and the huge amount of effort required to screen out the noise, and then they need to have some breaks, you know, do some stimming stuff.
Hi, I was wondering about the aging population for people with autism. We hear a lot about kids, but I'm wondering for people of your generation and maybe for the generations right behind you, of what issues should we be thinking about?
Well, most of the mild cases of autism all have jobs, and I do have a book, I don't think the bookstore's got it, called Different Not Less, and it's a story of 14 people my age. They got diagnosed later in life because they had relationship issues, but they all had jobs and had supported themselves all their lives, low-level jobs to high-level jobs. I did not fill it up full of techies. Okay, let's look at some of the verbal guys. There was a tour guide at a museum. That's a verbal type job. You know, and I actually put her as the first one in the book. So they just put the visual thinking stuff in the back. And these people managed to get jobs, and they all had paper routes when they were 12, so they had learned how to work. Some of them came from very modest backgrounds, low-income backgrounds, and I'm seeing too many people today not learning work skills and not willing. Sometimes work is work. And too many situations of people quit jobs, or a guy that lost 5 jobs in libraries because he talked about the fatzos couldn't fit through the elevator door. Well, I learned when I was 5 that you can't say that kind of stuff. I had problems at work. I got fired from one job, but I also had another job that I had with the feedlot construction company, and they had a big round of layoffs. I survived the round of layoffs because I was really good at getting press on their projects. That's one of the reasons why I survived the round of layoffs.
Professor Grandin.
Okay? Okay, I can't
Grandin.
tell which way the sound's going. Okay.
First of all, thank you for your perspective into education of students or learners with autism. I've been teaching for 17 years now. 10 years in the vocational setting, which seems like you're a proponent of.
I'm a big proponent of it.
What's your thoughts then about No Child Left Behind and how that's kind of pushing
That doesn't
that
have, people have taken a very short-sighted view of the tests. You do the VOTEC right, they're going to ace the tests. And again, the kids at the aviation school in New York are acing these tests. If you do your VOTEC right and work all the reading and the math into it, they'll ace the tests. People have a very rigid view of what they have to do to pass tests. And some of the kids with autism work really well with the Montessori math stuff. Some of those materials are good. They're free online. The other thing is there's fabulous free classes online now. MIT has free classes, Coursera, edX, Udacity, Khan Academy. I make sure you guys probably already know about a lot of that stuff. You know, we've got to start thinking more about what's going to happen when they grow up, because what drives me nuts is I go back and forth between the autism world and the business world. Is that I see all these business people and all these, like maintenance guys and construction guys, and even people running businesses that had various labels, and they're running businesses. And some of the juniors are ending up playing video games. And I would have been a video game addict if those things had been around. Absolute video game addict. I won't even touch them. I think they like crack cocaine. And I'm not suggesting banning them, but there's too many situations where you got like an 18-year-old and he's playing 12 hours a day playing video games in the basement. You know, just this kind of stuff. Okay.
I'll try to limit details, but I was also diagnosed with Asperger's a few years ago before I suspected, and one thing that I was constantly growing up with was that I was told, like, it doesn't matter how smart you are, all that matters is how good you communicate. You might not be able to get a job if you can't get over your communication difficulties.
Well, you do need to learn how to communicate. That's important. Yeah. What are you good at besides communicating?
I'm a fairly good writer, but I'm also like kind of a pattern thinker. I do pictures a lot, and in general, I just do everything. So, but I'm just terrible in general at talking. And I mean, there was I go to college next door to here, and I was actually told that, you know, it would be surprising if I got accepted, because I'm not. I mean, I can only talk to one person at a time. I'm not necessarily.
Well, you know, I was in graduate school. The first talk I ever gave, I panicked and walked out. And one of the things I learned, so you don't freeze, is to make sure you got slides there to like pace you. That helps. The other thing, as a visual thinker, I had a fancy portfolio I could show off. And that's how I sold my abilities. I showed off drawings and pictures of jobs. And I got really good on the phone. I could call up a plant. I'd find out that so-and-so's building a new plant. I'd get their number and information. I'd cold call them. I'd get the engineer on the phone and then get my portfolio sent to them. That's how I got jobs. I loved the phone because you don't have all the eye contact stuff and things like that. You need to find something you're good at. You actually seem like you communicated pretty well right now. You did a great job of communicating. Don't underestimate yourself.
Hi there. So I was homeschooled for most of my life, but I went to a public high school. And so I feel like the public school system in this nation is pretty darn good at, like, you know, trying to make you conform, and like it's good at crushing you if you have like a different type of thinking. Like,
you're in high school right now?
No, I'm a college student. But so it sounds like you're a pretty like big advocate for trade schools and stuff, like a return to trade schools.
Well, I'm not saying that you just go to trade school and don't learn any academics. What they're doing is aviation school, because these kids are learning high-level academics too. You see, the problem in education is they tend to get into fads.
Yep. Well, so my question, I have a specific question. So what would your ideal like school system be?
An ideal school to me would have all the VOTEC classes in it, have the academics in it, you know, and because, you know, people got to learn how to write. I mean, you couldn't fix a car today if you couldn't read really well. You know, you've got to have computer skills to do that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff you need to have. And one thing Germany does, let's look at the countries where the economy's not a mess. Germany never shut down their trade schools. I'm seeing some good programs in the junior colleges, but one of the problems I'm seeing is we need to start teaching middle school kids how to work. We also need to get them, show them different professions and things they might go into. I'm seeing some very good things that some community colleges are doing right now on fancy chefs. I went to a program where students were learning how to be fancy chefs, not just, you know, burger flippers. And half the class had Asperger's. And they were doing a really good job. You know, the first thing, like, what do you study in college? Engineering. Engineering, good. Those jobs out there, what kind of engineering are you studying? Electrical. Electrical? Okay, let me tell you what's hot. I know where the jobs are at. Electrical engineering and computer science together. Really hot, the dab of mechanical. That's hot.
You spoke a little bit about your mom's influences and what she allowed or didn't allow that you think helped you. And I'd love to hear you speak more on what it is that you think you benefited from. Some of it sounds like her disciplinarian or her guidance to keep you where, you know,
Well, there
help
were
you?
certain things where there were strict rules. Be on time for meals, manners, that was all really strict. But then things like my art, that was always encouraged. And I was always encouraged to broaden my art out and not just do constant horse heads. They weren't going to let me just stay in my room. She had to get me out doing things. Also, some of this is the old-fashioned 50s upbringing, because I see other people that are mildly on the spectrum that are my age that manage to get jobs all their life. And then their problems with their relationships are a mess. And then when they understand something about autism, that really helps them with their relationships. You know, where all the old Asperger's, or now they're going to change it to social communication disorder, most of them managed to get jobs, they managed to keep them. Now, there's been some bad messes where they get, the company closes when they're 50 and they don't know what to do with themselves. But there's others that have had very, very good careers. I've talked to NASA space scientists. I've talked to journalists that I know are on the spectrum. You also have to learn how to do tasks that other people want. They didn't want me just talking about cattle chutes. They wanted me to design cattle chutes. You know, that's, see, the problem is you're dealing with such a big spectrum, and they almost need two kinds of services. You know, the little kids, it's the same, but then they kind of diverge, and you've got ones where you got the ones more like me, and then you got the ones where they're going to have to be in some kind of supervised situation. And the kind of work they can do is much simpler. And a lot of teachers have a hard time sort of jumping across. Also, I'm seeing people get locked into the label. You know, and I'm seeing too many people where autism is their total thing. Their fixation is autism. My fixation was cattle chutes. And that was something that I could turn into a career. And people have asked me if I could snap my finger, would I want to be not autistic? No, I like the logical way I think. But autism is secondary to being a professor. And I have books on livestock handling. I've got to revise my textbook on livestock handling and transport. A bestseller in that is maybe 1,000 copies if you're really lucky. And I spend as much time working on that book as I do on my regular books, because that's my actual real job. And I've had to work very hard to hang on to my real job. Teach my class. No, they can't just put a book tour over the top of my class. They can't cancel my PACO training and the American Meat Institute conference. I mean, these are things that I'm going to do. And I think you know, if we're trying to get kids to be successful, I think it's important that I keep my real job. And I certainly liked coming here tonight, and we'll go sign some books, and thank you all for coming.